Tides is to Brazilian. Requesting gamma pattern Hammerfall Bunker on my location immediately.
You mean to jump?
Request confirmed. Stand by.
Hello and welcome to the channel. My name is Hammer and today we will be building and painting the Hammerfall Bunker. Now, we all know that GW absolutely loves and adores fortifications in 10th edition. Sorry, I'm just getting this in now. I've been told that apparently GW hates fortifications this edition. Why don't we have a quick look at that data sheet? Oh dear. No movement, no AC, and some pretty subpar shooting, and some rules that might as well not exist. This is a tragedy. But that's okay. We don't always have to do things because they're the meta and we will crush the enemy team. So why don't we start building, and I'll ramble on why I'm actually doing this video today. As you can see from the contents of this box, it is a single part kit, though technically I would say it's two parts because you've got the bottom part and the top part, and the top part likes to spin around and around. Now, to the reason about why I'm building this model today. The first time I laid eyes on this model in a GW store, I fell in love with it. And then I read the rules for it, and I told myself, no way. There is absolutely zero chance I am buying a model with the little money I have for hobby for something that sucks. But every time I saw it, I fell in love with it even more. And the more I fell in love with it, the more I came up with ideas of how I would be able to use it in army lists. And I kept thinking, and then I had the absolute genius idea, which is, why do I need to include it in an army list? Why not just build it and paint it for the sake of building and painting it? It's an awesome looking model after all. Who cares if I never get to use it? And that is where my brain went down a slippery slope and I could not stop thinking about how awesome this model is and how, I can justify this. We'll use it as a piece of terrain. And, my friend who plays Death Guard, he has miasmic malignifier, so I'll be able to use that as terrain as well. And wait a second, if we both have a pretty useless piece of terrain, then why don't we use it as a special mission rule? He could set his on my side, I could set mine on his side, and the goal of the game is to get our men up to the other side of the board and activate our building first. So, when it came to starting this channel with my good friend Scuffed, I was thinking of ideas that would be good to do for the first few videos, and my brain could not get off the fact that I really wanted to do the Hammerfall Bunker. So, I bought it. And now, you're here listening to me spew all over the place about how much I absolutely love this model while you're watching footage of me building it. So I'll hold on to my rambling for a little bit towards the end, and I'll start explaining about what's happening in the video you're actually watching. This model is almost completely symmetrical, down to one or two details that are asymmetrical. So when it comes to building it, it's actually very quite easy, because you only have to learn how to build something once, and then you just have to repeat it 4 times, and boom, then you have it down pat. Now, I'll say this a lot, but this step is not completely necessary. But if you love it and it brings you joy, do it. Now, I bought this drill a long time ago because I like having little tools around, but I'm also using a big cordless hand drill today to show you that you don't need to buy special tools to be able to do this kind of thing. Little details in models like this are just what makes these kind of things sing, especially because it's completely symmetrical. Just make sure you're careful when you're using the hand drill or you'll go all the way through it like I did. And then you'll have to do some special trickery to make sure that you can't see all the way through to the hollow model and use some of the sprue to cover it over. As you'll soon come to find if you like to stick around with this channel, I am a massive fan of salamanders. They were my first army and I think I'll play them until I get rid of this hobby. But because I'm a salamanders fan, of course I had to go with the flamer option. At this point in the hobby, I have learnt to carefully read the instructions before I just start cutting and gluing. I can remember a few of my early models, I glued down parts that shouldn't have been glued down, and now they are stuck immobile forever. Both the turret and the base have ridges where it connects to help make sure that you don't lose it. I would love to give credit to whoever I got this idea from, but I'm pretty sure I saw it on Reddit once. I know, the yucky website, but it is useful for hobby tips like this. Often you'll find thin bits like antenna will break or snap. So instead, use the bristles off the head of a broom, or whatever else you've got laying around that is strong, pliable, flexible, but most importantly, durable. Now I will admit, I struggled with this part. My fingers aren't the best and my hands are a little shaky. This was a little bit finicky and I struggled to make sure that it stuck without getting glue all over my fingers and making sure it was straight. But in the end I got there. And to add to the confusion and punishment of making this part of the model, the missile section is double-sided, so you can use it for the front and the back. Now this part scared me. I thought the glue wasn't going to sit properly and I was going to be stuck with the turret faced in a weird position. I'll add this to my collection of cover art. And it's time to do some priming. Now, I have been fortunate enough to be able to afford an airbrush, but not everyone is so lucky. So this step is just as easily done with a rattle can, but I'll use the tools I have. Now this step is completely unnecessary if you just want a pure silver. I, on the other hand, don't quite like the look of that. I like to do a dry brushing of silver to get this gunmetal colour that I learnt from eons of battle. and I've learnt that to make sure that the best way to not get green on the pieces I want black for the future step is to use tape. This is the Tamiya brand tape, and I found it to work really well. You'll occasionally get a bit of tape ripped up, but I'm going to chalk that down to user error. I bought this set off Amazon. It's 3 different lengths, so you'll have everything you will need from big things to little things. I'll drop the link below. Before I got an airbrush, I used to use Warpstone Glow as the base of my salamanders. But since it is easier to get this colour down with an airbrush, I've found that 3 drops of AK Deep Green and 2 drops of AK Medium Olive is close enough that it doesn't really matter once we do our final step to make that green real pop. Now you might notice me struggling with this bit here, and that's because between doing the turret and the base, I had to go do a job. And between me doing that job, the paint dried in the end of the nozzle, so I struggled to get it finished, but I got it there and then did a deep clean of my airbrush. Now, here's some of those tears I was telling you about earlier. Not to worry though, it's an easy fix. I have some brush-on primer that I got in a painting kit from the army painter, so this will be fixed up in no time. Now, it's time to touch up where the airbrush didn't quite reach. Airbrushes are great, but they aren't perfect. They'll miss some spots, and especially if the user is not that great at using them, you won't get proper coverage. So I find that I'll need to go over with some actual Warpstone Glow, just thin it down a little bit, and put it over the bits that look a little splotchy or were a bit hard to reach. The same thing goes for the black. I find that the tape isn't perfect, but it sure does stop a lot more than you would if you didn't use it. I like to use Black Legion Contrast just because it's quick, easy, and it's kind of about the right colour as the prime that I use. At this stage in the model, I like to write down all the ideas I'm having about how I'd like it to look, and then that way I can go to sleep without having to think about it for 10 hours. This is the perfect recipe for a gunmetal. A coating of rattling grime and then a dry brush of silver. I like to use lead belcher, but I've seen some people use other things. I would credit a specific video that Eons of Battle put this in, but to be honest, I can't remember which ones that he mentioned it in, though he does use it in a lot of them. So if you're looking for that, I'd just go to his channel and watch all of his content. Personally, I think it's really good. Once we have the perfect gunmetal, we can move on to doing some of the other details. Now most people do missiles red, but this is a salamanders, so I'm doing mine purple. And you can't forget the classic black that salamanders have on their backpacks and their shoulders. There's not a lot of room to do that on this model, so I'm doing it on the one bit of paneling that looks recessed compared to the rest of it. Then I'll go in and paint the silver thing silver before doing a few more touch-ups before moving on to the last few steps. Between you and me, lenses don't need to be that hard. Just put down a base coat of the colour that you want, do a half moon shape of white, and then thin out the original colour. Use it as a glaze, and then the white part will look like a slightly lighter part of the original colour. And like every good Imperial citizen, we must make sure that those Aquillas are gold, before we move on to our next step, the washes. This is my secret sauce for what makes my salamanders just pop, and why it doesn't matter too much that the airbrush recipe isn't quite right. A healthy layer of Mantis Warrior contrast on every single bit that is green just gives it that deep, fluoro-green-esque kind of colour that I really love. And of course you gotta dirty up your silver a little bit with a bit of Adrax Earthshade or Nuln Oil. I went ahead and did a few details like the bullet holes and the transfers off screen because they're a bit finicky and I couldn't get good footage. And for the final touch, the flamers. I like to add some heat stress, and you can replicate this effect by using the shades Seraphim Sepia, Drukhari Violet, and Drakenhof Nightshade. And now for the final reveal. And that's a wrap. Thank you for sticking around and watching my first video right to the end. That's all from me today. This is Hammer signing off and handing over to you, Scuffed. Your turn.